Most people enter a new year asking the wrong question. They ask, what do I need to add to my life? But the people who actually win ask a different question. What do I need to remove? Because growth is not about accumulation, it's about elimination. You don't step into a higher level by carrying the same habits, the same thinking, and the same distractions that kept you stuck before. As we step into 2026, the gap between where you are and where you want to be is not a mystery. It's already visible in what you tolerate, what you excuse, and what you refuse to let go of. Today is not about motivation, it's about decisions, because the life you want is on the other side of what you're willing to cut. Ladies and gentlemen, as we step into 2026, I want to ask you a question that might make you uncomfortable. But discomfort is often the doorway to transformation. If nothing in your life changes this year, whose fault will it be? Not the economy, not your past, not the people who didn't support you. The real reason most people don't level up isn't because they lack opportunity, it's because they refuse to let go. Success is not just about what you add to your life, it's about what you have the courage to remove. You don't rise by accumulation alone, you rise by elimination. And today I want to talk about 12 things that, if you cut them from your life in 2026, will create space for growth, clarity, and power. The first thing you must cut is excuses. An excuse is simply a story you tell yourself to avoid responsibility. And responsibility is not a burden, it's leverage. The moment you take ownership of your results, you gain control over your future. As long as you blame something outside of you, you give your power away. High performers don't look for reasons, they look for results. The second thing to cut is low-value relationships. Not every relationship is meant to last a lifetime, and not every person deserves access to your dreams. Some people are in your life to support your growth, while others are there to test your boundaries. If someone constantly drains your energy, doubts your vision, or normalizes mediocrity, they are not neutral. They are subtracting from your future. Proximity is powerful. Who you listen to will shape what you believe, and what you believe will shape what you become. Third, cut distractions. Distraction is the enemy of destiny. Every time you say yes to something unimportant, you say no to something meaningful. Focus is not about doing more things, it's about doing fewer things better. The world will always compete for your attention, but only disciplined people decide what deserves it. If you don't control your focus, someone else will. Fourth, cut the need for approval. You cannot build an extraordinary life while begging for permission from ordinary thinking. The desire to be liked will cost you the life you are meant to live. Most people don't fail because they're incapable. They fail because they're afraid of criticism. But rejection is not a sign you're on the wrong path. It's often proof that you're on a different one. Fifth, cut scarcity thinking. Scarcity is not about money, it's about mindset. When you believe there's not enough, you compete. When you believe there's abundance, you create. Your income will never exceed your self-image. If you don't believe you deserve more, you'll subconsciously sabotage every opportunity that tries to reach you. Expansion starts in the mind before it ever shows up in your bank account. Sixth, cut inconsistent standards. Your standards are not what you say you want, they are what you tolerate. If you tolerate laziness, chaos, or broken promises from yourself, that becomes your identity. Discipline is not about motivation, it's about deciding once and honoring that decision daily. Your future will not be built by what you do occasionally, but by what you do consistently. Seventh, cut emotional decision-making. Feelings are great servants, but terrible leaders. If you make decisions based on how you feel instead of what you know, you'll live a reactive life. Mature people make principle-based decisions, not mood-based ones. Long-term success requires short-term discipline, and discipline doesn't ask how you feel, it asks who you want to become. Eighth, cut comparison. Comparison is the fastest way to become ungrateful and unfocused at the same time. Someone else's chapter is not your assignment. You don't need their results, you need your own progress. The only person you should compete with is who you were last year. Growth accelerates when you stay in your own lane. Ninth, cut procrastination. Procrastination is not a time problem, it's a priority problem. You don't delay what you value. If you keep putting it off, it's because you haven't decided that your future is more important than your comfort. Clarity creates speed. Once you decide, momentum follows. 10th, cut negative self-talk. The most influential voice in your life is the one you talk to yourself with every day. If you wouldn't say it to someone you respect, you shouldn't say it to yourself. Confidence is not arrogance, it's agreement with truth. And the truth is, you are more capable than your doubts would ever admit. 11th, cut the habit of consuming without creating. Information without application leads to frustration. Entertainment without execution leads to regret. You don't need more motivation, you need more movement. Creation puts you in control. When you create, you shift from spectator to leader. And finally, cut waiting for the perfect time. Perfect timing is a myth used by fearful people to justify inaction. Progress favors the bold, not the ready. You become ready by starting, not by waiting. Action creates clarity, not the other way around. As you walk into 2026, understand this, your next level is not hidden from you. It's hidden behind what you refuse to let go of. When you cut what's holding you back, you make room for what's meant to move you forward. Decide today that this will be the year you stop negotiating with your potential and start enforcing your destiny. The future doesn't belong to the lucky, it belongs to the intentional. And intention begins with the courage to cut. Most people don't fail because they lack talent, resources, or opportunity. They fail because they protect their excuses more than they protect their future. An excuse is not just a reason, it's a decision to stay where you are while convincing yourself it's justified. Every excuse sounds logical, reasonable, and even responsible. But the truth is this, excuses don't remove obstacles, they only remove your power. The moment you explain why something can't be done, you silently agree that it won't be done by you. Accountability is the opposite of excuses. Accountability is not blame, shame, or pressure. It is ownership. And ownership is the most empowering position a human being can take. When you take accountability, you stop waiting for circumstances to change and start changing your response to circumstances. You realize that while you may not control everything that happens to you, you absolutely control what you do next. That realization alone can change the trajectory of a life. Excuses keep you emotionally comfortable, but financially poor, mentally stagnant, and spiritually weak. They give you relief without results. Accountability. Why, on the other hand, demands effort but produces growth. It forces you to look in the mirror instead of out the window. It asks a hard question most people avoid. What part did I play in the results I'm getting? That question is uncomfortable, but it is also the doorway to freedom. When you cut excuses, you stop outsourcing responsibility to your past, your environment, or other people. You stop saying, if only things were different, and start saying, given things as they are, what am I going to do? That shift changes everything. It turns problems into projects and setbacks into setups. Excuses make you a victim of life. Accountability makes you a participant in your own success. Accountability sharpens your thinking. You stop dramatizing problems and start solving them. You stop rehearsing reasons and start rehearsing actions. You begin to understand that results don't respond to intentions, emotions, or explanations. They respond to execution. Life doesn't reward what you meant to do. It rewards what you actually did. Here's the hard truth. Every area of your life where you feel stuck is connected to an area where you've been excusing yourself. Maybe it's your finances, your health, your relationships, or your discipline. Wherever excuses are allowed to live, progress is forced to move out. You cannot excuse your way into a better future. You must decide your way into one. Accountability also builds trust, both with yourself and with others. When you keep your word to yourself, your confidence grows. When you stop negotiating with your standards, your self-respect increases. And when people see that you don't blame, complain, or justify, they listen. Leaders are trusted not because they are perfect, but because they are accountable. Cutting excuses doesn't mean being harsh with yourself. It means being honest with yourself. It means acknowledging reality without resistance. It means saying, this is where I am, this is what I have, and this is what I'm committed to changing. Accountability is not about beating yourself up for past mistakes. It's about refusing to repeat them. When you embrace accountability, you stop waiting to be rescued. You stop hoping motivation will magically appear. You move even when you don't feel like it because you understand that feelings follow action, not the other way around. Discipline replaces drama. Progress replaces pity. If 2026 is going to be different, it won't be because conditions improved. It will be because your standards did. And that begins the moment you cut excuses out of your vocabulary and replace them with responsibility. Because the fastest way to change your life is to stop explaining why you can't and start proving that you can. Every relationship in your life is either adding weight to your wings or adding chains to your feet. There is no neutral ground. People influence your thinking, your habits, your standards, and ultimately your results, often more than you realize. Low-value relationships are not always loud, toxic, or obviously destructive. Many of them are subtle. They show up as comfort without challenge, familiarity without growth, and loyalty without alignment. And because they feel safe, they are often the hardest to let go of. Low-value relationships drain you without ever demanding more from you. They normalize excuses, reinforce limitations, and make average feel acceptable. These are the relationships where your ambition feels too much, your discipline feels extreme, and your vision makes others uncomfortable. Not because your goals are unrealistic, but because your growth exposes their stagnation. And rather than rise to meet you, they try to pull you back to where they are. One of the biggest mistakes people make is confusing history with destiny. Just because someone has been in your life for a long time does not mean they are meant to go with you into your future. Time invested is not a qualification for access. Alignment is. Some people are seasonal, necessary for who you were, but incompatible with who you're becoming. Holding on to them out of guilt, nostalgia, or fear only delays the next version of your life. Low-value relationships also show up as constant negativity. Conversations revolve around problems instead of solutions, complaints instead of strategy, and criticism instead of contribution. Over time, this kind of environment reshapes your thinking. You begin to lower your expectations, second-guess your decisions, and question your potential. Not because you lack ability, but because you've been listening to voices that don't carry vision. You cannot build a high-standard life while surrounded by low-standard thinking. Energy is contagious. Mindsets transfer. If you spend enough time with people who are committed to comfort, you will slowly abandon growth without even realizing it. That's why proximity is powerful. Who you allow close to you determines what feels normal, what feels possible, and what feels necessary. Cutting low-value relationships doesn't mean becoming arrogant, cold, or dismissive. It means becoming intentional. It means recognizing that access to you is a privilege, not an entitlement. Everyone doesn't deserve the same level of proximity. Some people belong in your inner circle, some in your outer circle, and some in your past. Boundaries are not walls. They are filters. There will be resistance when you begin to change. People who benefited from the old version of you will often resent the new one. They may accuse you of changing, forgetting where you came from, or thinking you're better than them. But growth always looks like betrayal to those who don't want to grow. You are not required to shrink to make others comfortable. High-value relationships challenge you. They speak truth even when it's uncomfortable. They celebrate your discipline, respect your boundaries, and encourage your vision. They don't compete with you. They sharpen you. They don't drain your inner, they multiply it. And the more you elevate your standards, the more essential these relationships become. Letting go is uncomfortable, but staying stuck is far more expensive. Every low-value relationship you maintain costs you time, focus, and emotional energy, resources you can never get back. When you release what no longer aligns, you create space for relationships that do. Space is not emptiness, it's preparation. If 2026 is going to be a year of elevation, then your environment must match your intention. You don't owe anyone access to your future. Protect your energy. Guard your vision. Choose relationships that reinforce who you are becoming, not who you used to be. Because the quality of your life will always reflect the quality of the relationships you allow to surround you. Distraction is one of the most expensive habits a person can have, yet it's rarely treated like a problem. Most people think distraction is harmless. Just a quick scroll, a short break, a small delay. But distraction doesn't announce itself as danger. It disguises itself as entertainment, urgency, and busyness. And while it feels insignificant in the moment, over time it quietly erodes focus, discipline, and momentum. Dreams don't usually die from one big mistake. They die from 1,000 small distractions that slowly drain your attention. Focus is not just about concentration, it's about direction. Whatever consistently has your attention will eventually shape your life. If your focus is scattered, your results will be scattered. You can't build something meaningful with fractured attention. Success requires sustained effort in a single direction, and distraction is the constant interruption that prevents depth, mastery, and progress. One of the greatest illusions is the belief that you can multitask your way to excellence. In reality, multitasking is just switching attention rapidly, and every switch carries a cost. Each distraction resets your mental momentum. It pulls you out of flow and forces you to start again. That constant restarting is exhausting, and exhaustion is often mistaken for lack of motivation. It's not that people don't want to succeed, it's that they're mentally drained from giving their attention to too many unimportant things. Distractions also create the illusion of productivity. You feel busy, occupied, and active, but you're not moving forward. Busyness without progress is one of the most dangerous traps because it feels responsible while producing nothing. You can fill your days with noise and still avoid the one task that would actually change your life. Distraction becomes a socially acceptable form of procrastination. The real danger of distraction is that it trains your brain to avoid discomfort. Focus requires effort. Growth requires tension. Distraction offers instant relief from both. Every time you choose distraction over discipline, you reinforce the habit of escaping instead of engaging. Over time, your tolerance for deep work shrinks, and anything that requires sustained effort begins to feel overwhelming, even when it's necessary. Cutting distractions requires honesty. You must identify what consistently pulls you away from what matters most. Not everything that feels urgent is important, and not everything that feels enjoyable is harmless. If something repeatedly steals your time without moving you closer to your goals, it's not a break, it's a leak, and small leaks sink big ships. Focus is protected by boundaries. If you don't decide in advance what deserves your attention, the world will decide for you. Notifications, messages, opinions, and endless content will compete aggressively for your focus. None of them care about your future, only you do. Discipline is not about restriction, it's about protection. Protecting your time, your energy, and your vision. When you cut distractions, clarity increases. You stop reacting and start responding. You gain the ability to think strategically instead of emotionally. Your work improves because your mind is no longer fragmented. Momentum builds because progress compounds when attention is sustained. Confidence grows because you begin to trust yourself to follow through. Discomfort is part of focus. Boredom is part of focus. Resistance is part of focus. But on the other side of that resistance is mastery. The people who win are not the most talented, they are the most focused. They choose depth over novelty, purpose over pleasure, and long-term result. S over short-term stimulation. If 2026 is going to be a year of breakthrough, distraction cannot come with you. You cannot expect extraordinary results while giving ordinary things your best energy. Cut what steals your focus, and you reclaim your power. Because attention is your most valuable asset, and where it goes, your life follows. The need for approval is one of the most invisible limitations a person can carry. It doesn't look like fear at first. It looks like politeness, humility, and being agreeable. But beneath the surface, it quietly controls decisions, dilutes conviction, and keeps potential locked away. When you live for approval, you hand other people the authority to validate your choices, your vision, and your worth. And no one can build an extraordinary life while outsourcing their confidence. Approval-seeking trains you to prioritize comfort over truth. You begin to edit yourself, soften your standards, and delay bold decisions, not because they're wrong, but because they might be misunderstood. You start asking, what will they think? Before asking, what is required? Over time, this habit turns into self-betrayal. You know what you should do, but you hesitate. Not because you lack clarity, but because you fear disapproval. The problem is not that people have opinions. The problem is when their opinions outrank your principles. Everyone has a perspective, but not everyone has the responsibility of living with the consequences of your choices. When you need approval, you allow people who are not invested in your future to influence it. That's a dangerous exchange. The need for approval is often rooted in the fear of rejection, but rejection is not the enemy. Conformity is. Rejection is a sign that you are standing for something specific. Conformity is a slow erosion of your identity. Most people don't regret the criticism they faced. They regret the version of themselves they never became because they were too busy trying to be accepted. When you chase approval, you become reactive instead of intentional. Your decisions change depending on who is watching. Your confidence fluctuates based on feedback. Praise lifts you too high, and criticism drops you too low. That emotional instability makes consistency impossible, and consistency is required for growth. Cutting the need for approval doesn't mean becoming reckless or dismissive of feedback. It means distinguishing between constructive counsel and emotional noise. Wisdom listens. Insecurity seeks permission. Mature people evaluate feedback. Insecure people obey it. There is a difference between learning and conforming. Great outcomes require unpopular decisions. Discipline is rarely applauded. Focus is often misunderstood. Growth makes people uncomfortable, especially those who have chosen comfort over progress. If you require applause to move forward, you will stop every time the room goes quiet, and the room will go quiet often. When you release the need for approval, your energy returns. You stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop shrinking your vision to fit someone else's limitations. You begin to move with clarity instead of consensus, and clarity always outperforms consensus. Confidence is not loud, it's settled. It's the calm assurance that you don't need agreement to act. When you trust your values and commit to your standards, you no longer need external validation. You become internally anchored. And when your confidence comes from within, it can't be taken away by criticism or withheld by silence. If 2026 is going to be a year of elevation, the need for approval cannot come with you. You cannot build a rare life while seeking common acceptance. Decide who you are, decide what you stand for, and let your results speak. Because the moment you stop living for approval is the moment you start living with purpose. Scarcity thinking is one of the most limiting mindsets a person can operate from, because it doesn't just affect what you have, it affects how you see. It narrows perspective, restricts imagina, and convinces you that life is a competition for limited resources rather than an opportunity for unlimited creation. When you think in scarcity, you don't make decisions based on growth, you make them based on fear. Fear of running out, fear of missing out, fear of someone else getting ahead. And fear never produces expansion. Scarcity thinking teaches you to protect instead of produce. You cling to what you have instead of building what you need. You hesitate to invest, collaborate, or take risks because you believe that loss is permanent and opportunity is rare. This mindset turns potential opportunities into perceived threats. Instead of asking, how can I create more? You ask, what if I lose what I have? And that question alone can keep you stuck for years. One of the most damaging lies of scarcity is the belief that someone else's success reduces your chances. This leads to comparison, jealousy, and silent resentment. You start measuring your progress against others instead of your own capacity. But success is not a fixed pie. It's an expandable system. Value creates value. When you understand this, competition turns into collaboration, and envy turns into strategy. Scarcity also shows up in self-worth. When you believe there isn't enough, you start believing you aren't enough. You undercharge, overcompromise, and settle for less than you're capable of producing. You say yes to things that drain you because you're afraid better opportunities won't come. But abundance doesn't respond to desperation. It responds to confidence and competence. Cutting scarcity thinking requires a shift from consumption to creation. Abundance is not about having more, it's about knowing you can produce more. Your skills, ideas, and discipline are renewable resources. The more you use them, the more they grow. When you realize that value is something you generate, not something you chase, you stop operating from fear and start operating from power. Scarcity thinking keeps you focused on circumstances. Abundance thinking focuses you on capabilities. Circumstances change slowly. Capabilities compound quickly. When you invest in learning, skill building, and execution, your options expand. Options are the real currency of abundance. The person with options is never trapped. Another sign of scarcity is short-term thinking. You prioritize immediate comfort over long-term gain. You avoid temporary sacrifice because you're afraid of permanent loss. But growth always requires an upfront cost. Time, energy, effort, discipline. Abundance-minded people understand that delayed gratification is not denial. It's strategy. When you release scarcity, generosity becomes natural. You share ideas instead of hoarding them. You invest instead of hiding. You help others grow because you're confident in your own capacity to rise. And paradoxically, generosity multiplies opportunity, not because it's magic, but because value circulates and attracts more value. If 2026 is going to be a year of expansion, scarcity thinking cannot come with you. You cannot step into abundance while clinging to fear. Decide to believe that growth is available, opportunity is expandable, and your ability to create is greater than any limitation you face. Because the moment you stop thinking in scarcity is the moment you start living in possibility. Inconsistent standards are one of the quietest reasons people stay stuck, because they don't look like failure. They look like effort without results. Most people don't lack goals, they lack enforcement. They know what they want, they talk about what they deserve, but they tolerate behaviors that contradict both. And whatever you tolerate, you train. Whatever you train, you become. Your life will never rise above the standards you refuse to consistently uphold. Standards are not what you announce when you're motivated. They are what you maintain when it's inconvenient. Anyone can operate at a high level when they feel inspired. Very few people do it when they're tired, distracted, or unobserved. Inconsistency creates internal confusion. One day you demand excellence. The next day you accept excuses. One day you commit to discipline. The next day you negotiate with comfort. That inconsistency erodes self-trust. And once you stop trusting yourself, progress slows dramatically. Inconsistent standards teach your mind that your word is flexible. And when your word becomes flexible, your identity becomes unstable. You begin to rely on mood instead of commitment, emotion instead of principle. The problem is not that you don't know what to do. The problem is that you don't always require yourself to do it. Discipline doesn't break down all at once. It weakens through repeated exceptions. Every exception feels small in the moment. Just this once, just today, just because it's been a long day. But exceptions compound, and over time they create a pattern. Patterns create outcomes. Your results are not random, they are predictable reflections of your standards in action. If your standards change based on circumstances, your results will too. High performers are not perfect, they are consistent. They don't ask, do I feel like it? They ask, what does the standard require? Standards remove decision fatigue. When expectations are clear, execution becomes simpler. You don't debate with yourself, you follow through. That clarity creates momentum, and momentum builds confidence. Inconsistent standards also affect how others treat you. People respond to what you enforce, not what you express. If you allow missed deadlines, broken boundaries, or lowered effort, you teach others how to interact with you. Respect is built on predictability. When your standards are firm, people adjust. When they're flexible, people test. Raising your standards is not about doing more. It's about tolerating less laziness, less distraction, less self-betrayal. It's about aligning your daily behavior with the Sure, you say you want. That alignment is uncomfortable at first because it demands sacrifice. But sacrifice is not loss. It's exchange. You give up what no longer serves you to gain what actually matters. Consistency creates identity. When you repeatedly show up at the level you expect, even when no one is watching, you become someone you respect. Self-respect fuels confidence. Confidence fuels action. Action fuels results. It all starts with standards that do not fluctuate based on convenience. If 2026 is going to be different, it won't be because you wanted more. It will be because you required more from yourself first. Cut inconsistent standards. Decide who you are. Decide what you allow, and then enforce it daily. Because the life you want is built not by occasional intensity, but by relentless consistency. As we step into 2026, understand this: your future does not require a new version of luck, a new environment, or a new set of circumstances. It requires a new level of discipline, awareness, and intentionality. The gap between where you are and where you want to be is not filled by more information. It's cleared by better decisions. Everything we talked about today points to one truth. Growth begins when you stop carrying what no longer serves you. Excuses weaken you. Low-value relationships drain you. Distractions scatter you. Approval-seeking limits you. Scarcity thinking traps you. Inconsistent standards hold you back. None of these are permanent unless you allow them to be. This year is not about becoming someone new. It's about returning to who you were always capable of being. When you cut what's been holding you down, you don't lose yourself, you uncover yourself. Clarity replaces confusion. Focus replaces chaos. Confidence replaces hesitation. 2026 can be the year you stop negotiating with your potential and start enforcing your standards. Decide today that your time matters, your vision matters, and your future matters. Because when you remove what weakens you, what's left is power. And power, when directed with purpose, changes everything.